So in case I haven't met you, I'm Robina. I'm in Santa Fe. That's it, isn't it? So here we are. Be your own therapist. This is something that Lama Yeshe said. Actually, I'll confess. Lama said, be your own psychologist. In one teaching, I found that years ago when I was editing. So when we did an article in Mandala, I decided to change it to therapist, which is really not naughty because he said psychologist. So maybe we should change it now to be your own psychologist. But we know the meaning is the same, isn't it? So what is it? So, it's interesting. It's a nice, a cute way. It's a cute thing to say. Anyway, be your own therapist. Know our own mind. And this is the thing, this is something I think it surprises us in the West. When we first hear about Buddhism, we mainly think, if we sort of did one of those competitions, we asked to say a word and say what it reminds you of. I think the commonest word, if people say Buddhism, people would say meditation. I think so, isn't it? Which is not wrong, but then we have to understand what meditation is and why we're using such skills. Because the real point, the Buddha's expertise, and this is the surprise to us, is that it's about the mind, as we talk all the time, it's about the mind. But also it's so integrated with that is this Buddhist concept, this Buddhist philosophical view called karma, which has got very weird understandings about that in our culture. So let's just talk about that, I think. I think it's, because we're so deeply in our religions talk about, and this is not criticism, this is fact. Our big main religions, like, the Arabic religions like Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, they all one thing in common they have is that there's a creator, there's a boss, generally known as God, whatever, with a capital G, usually depicted as male. We know that. And God is the boss. God is the creator of the universe. God is the highest, above which there can't be anything higher, and nobody can become like God. You can become like God, but you can't become God. So this is the one point where Buddha so radically is different. But unless we learn this, it's not evident to us. So what we tend to do when we hear Buddhism, a fourth to this list, of religion, quote unquote. The one thing we all have in common in the creative religions in general is it's the concept of a boss, and bosses run the show. Bosses give instructions, and then usually if there's a boss like your mother, if you're naughty, you get punished. If you're good, you get rewarded. So I think that philosophical view is very deep in our bones. This is even beyond religion. You don't blame your Jewish mother or your Catholic mother for this view. This is the Buddha's view, is this philosophically is a mistaken dualistic concept, this one of someone out there running the show. He's not being rude, but that he finds is a complete misconception. This is quite a shocking concept. Buddha just doesn't make it up. He just didn't get annoyed and start going off on his own trip. Through his own deeply internal, subtle observation of how things exist in reality and the mind and so on, he came up with this finding. So for the Buddha, there is no such thing as a creator. Therefore, no such thing as a boss. Therefore, no such thing as a punisher or a rewarder. Now, this is pretty intense for all of us, because that's how we think. Even if you're not religious, we still have this dualistic view that causes us to want to be a good girl. Why? Because we want to be rewarded. We don't want to be punished, which is behind so much of what we think and do, and so much of our suffering for the Buddha. So there's a really kind of powerful concept, and it's very fascinating. We should want to study and think about this. So what's the implication of this? What's the point? What's the experiential implication of this? Is that we're the boss. This is the Buddha's view. So, okay, you've got the materialist view. Philosophically, there's one thing that they have in common with all the religions, which is they track us back to somebody. So we are made by our mother, aren't we? We are created by our parents. And then the way we track that back, we go back to the grandparents and the great-grandparents, then back to the monkeys. That's the way we see the evolution of a person, isn't it, in the philosophical materialist view of the world. So we look for the causes out there, back there. We look back into the past. Now, Buddha has no problem with that. Yeah, of course, we're all products of our past. Nothing special. But what past does Buddha look into? And this is the radical difference. Buddha asserts that our consciousness, our mind, our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, our unconscious, subconscious, instinct, intuition, you name it. This is called mind or consciousness for the Buddha, and it's not physical. Now, this is the one thing that Buddha would share with the other religions that also posit something not physical, but they call it a soul or a spirit. I think the Greeks call it an essence, but the Buddha would call it consciousness, mind. So we normally in the modern world we talk about body, mind, and spirit. There's no third one for the Buddha. There's only the mind. But the difference is for the Buddha: one, the mind is not physical. It's not talking about the brain. Two, he doesn't use a word like spirit, but the word mind covers all of that. From the subtlest to the most gross level of our being, the word mind or consciousness. So then, of course, our first question is, well, where does it come from? We want to look into the past. What's the cause of it? Well, for the Buddha, the mind, is this continuity of mental moments, this continuity of thoughts, feelings, emotions, unconscious, subconscious. It's a continuity. It's like a river of mental moments. They even have a term in Buddhist psychology called mental continuum. So think of your mind like a river of mental moments, So we want a big bang cause. We wanted, where did it begin? Even when we go to our therapist and we want to know what the cause of all my suffering is, we keep looking back like for a needle in a haystack, and we're convinced we're going to go, ha, there's the cause. There's the first moment. We want a first moment. Well, the Buddha laughs at that. He says, don't be silly. How can there be a first moment? Because everything's a continuity of cause and effect. And if you posit cause and effect as a natural law and look at the world, then how can you have a first cause? It's by definition ridiculous. And yet the Christians, I'm not being rude, the Catholics have a detailed looking into this, and they posit that you can have a first cause, capital F, capital C, and they call it God. And they give the logical reasons why it's possible for something to exist that doesn't have a cause. The Buddha says, no, not viable. This is if a person seriously wants to study Buddhism, this is what you're going to look into. You don't just close your eyes and believe it, which is how we tend to think of religion. But all the time, the reason to do this, what's the reason to do this? What's the reason to squeeze our brains, as Lama Yeshe says? It's not just to be clever, not just to pass your philosophical exam and be smarty pants. It has to have an experiential application. If it doesn't, don't waste your time thinking about it. It's got to be applied experientially. We know that when it comes to, botany, music, mathematics. You don't just leave it in your head. You put it into practice. That's the point here. How do we put all this stuff into practice? And this is the point. So the experiential implication of this concept of mind being not physical, number one. Number two, it's not being the handiwork of another person out there. That's the wackiest idea for the Buddha. And it's not having a first big bang moment. As His Holiness in all these wonderful discussions with all the scientists, he said, big bang, no problem, just not the first big bang, that's all. So for the Buddha, cause and effect means that the entire physical universe itself, it can't have a first moment. Of course, this particular universe had a first moment. This particular package called Robina had a first moment. This particular computer had a first moment. But all the components of this computer, this Robina, this universe, they come from previous causes. Just not the first big bang, that's all. Everything in the universe, the Buddha's view is that whatever exists, matter or minds, there's only two kinds of phenomena, matter or minds, they are each necessarily beginningless. And this is hilarious for our concept. I mean, this is what we think of. If it's God, God is beginningless, if you like. So that's how we posit, if we're Christian or Muslim, that that's the first cause. There it is, this perfect being who has always existed. Buddha doesn't agree with that. So it's very interesting views, but the experiential implication of all of this is what? I'm the boss. I came into this life programmed with my tendencies, my experiences. I'm the creator. Dalai Lama calls karma self-creation. This is a marvelous concept. Now, this is very where it's painful, but if we look at one of the unfortunate experiential implications of believing we are made by someone else, is the victim. I didn't ask to get born. It's not my fault. Look at the way we suffer daily. I mean, bad things do happen to us. There is no doubt. But when we're caught up in the complete, typical, instinctive, ego-based, which is victim mind, and this sounds very cruel, The feeling is it's not fair. I don't deserve that. It's the feeling we have is it's not fair. I don't deserve this. This is the basis of so much of our pain and suffering on this planet, and including when we see suffering out there. How dare that happen? Those people don't deserve it. This is where we go crazy. This is where we completely lose our minds, because we can't understand why things happen. So if you're totally devoted to God, you will say it is God's will, and I have no argument with that. If you have the philosophical view that there's a boss, a creator, all-knowing, all-seeing, who runs the show, then absolutely it is God's will. So shut up and deal with God's will and be happy. And I'm not being sarcastic. I think that is a profound view. I always quote this Muslim mummy and daddy whose daughter had died in a plane crash in Malaysia. How do you feel about the death of your daughter? We are peaceful, they said. She belongs to God and he has taken her back. I have no problem with that philosophical view if that's what you feel and that's your view, because if there is a being who does run the show, who knows everything and plans everything, then of course you have to have that view. You can't argue with God. You can't second guess God. You can't say, well, I believe in a creator. I believe in a God who's perfect, but he's, you moan and complain about him. I'm sorry. You can't have it both ways. If you're really going to believe in a creator, it's a profound view, and it'll cause you to be quite content because you know that God's got a plan. He's got it in his pocket. He doesn't need to tell you. He knows what he's doing. I think that's an amazing view. But that's not the Buddhist view, that's all. So we've got, whatever view it is, we've got to put our money where our mouth is, So the essence of the Buddhist view of karma is, one, we've got a consciousness which goes back and back and back and back and back. Two, every millisecond of what we think and do and say programs that mind. The main cause of what's in my mind or the main cause of what's in my life is what I think and do and say. That's the essence of the view of karma. Of course, it sounds insane on the face of it. So one has to look into it and study it and look at the logic of it and think about it and meditate on it and then attempt to live according to it. So what's the result of living according to it? Well, if we take it seriously and slowly start to practice it, giving up the victim view, giving up the panic and fear of I don't deserve all this, the good or the bad. We never say it about the good. And this is where it's so fascinating. We assume we deserve good things. Now, I find this point so fascinating. We could spend hours on this one. I think this is a fascinating view. Look at this one. Instinctively, we know that when good things happen, we never even question it. Because why? Because we assume we deserve good things. This is so deep in our view. It's so deeply instinctive as a view and as a truth. We absolutely never question it. Think about this. We take it for granted. And then we think, give me more. But look what happens when bad things happen. What preoccupies our mind all day is when we're suffering, is when the bad things happen. We don't think that. I've never met a person yet who says, oh, I can't stop thinking good things, Robina. I can't stop being grateful for all the amazing things that have happened to me. No, we on and on and on about all the bad things. Why? Because instinctively, the deepest in the depth of the bones of our being, ego's view is the view of an innocent victim who was made by somebody else, who didn't ask to get born, who plays no role in their life, and to whom bad and good things happen unfairly. That's an analysis of what ego is. Buddha argues with all of that. It's quite powerful. It's not easy to apply it. But we fixate on the bad things. Then we start listening to Buddhism, we get fixated and we're obsessed. I must be a bad person. Every person I've ever met who's been a Buddhist, who starts to think about karma, oh, I must have been a really bad person in the past. Everybody says that. I've never yet heard a person say, I must have been a really good person in the past. Because if we analyzed every millisecond, if you tracked one of your days, just one, and you ticked from the first second that you get out of bed until the time you go to sleep, if you start ticking the boxes of good experiences and bad experiences, everybody in this room, even if you're in a prison where you don't even belong, you'd still have far more good things than bad. But we don't notice the good. We only notice the bad, and they loom large, and then we feel like victims. I mean, this is natural. Don't feel guilty. This is just the way ego is constructed. So we have to unpack and unravel it and argue with it. Every second you find even 1 grain of rice. Every second you have a roof over your head. Every second you have not too much pain in your knees. Every second that someone smiles at you. Every second the sun is shining and the weather's reasonable. Every second that your bed is comfortable. Every second any tiny miniature good thing happens. That is the fruit of some incredible virtue of yours. You grew those seeds and they are now ripening as some level of experience of reasonable things happening. But we take them for granted. We take them for granted because we assume we deserve them, and so then we demand more, or we don't even notice them. And then we become dissatisfied with them. But when a bad thing happens, panic attack, complete panic attack. This is not criticism. This is just how we are. So you have to analyze it, you know. So it takes great courage to turn this big atomic bomb energy around. So the essence of karma is that the mind, what goes on in the mind, is the main source of your happiness and suffering. And what you do and think and say is therefore the job of being a Buddhist, is to mold our minds into the shape we like, which of course is the shape of goodness and wisdom and clarity and contentment and satisfaction and joy and compassion and love and kindness. These are the words of the components of a happy mind. And to change the, you know, to argue with the conceptual stories that are the components of an unhappy mind. Fear, anxiety, anger, depression, jealousy, attachment. This is not being critical, not being negative. This is the analysis the Buddha gives that we use as the basis of our daily practice. And of course it's hard work. Oh my goodness, it's hard work, you know. But it's worthwhile if we buy into it. And it goes to very instinctive levels, you know. And the other thing about karma, which is sort of mind-blowing and it sounds like science fiction to us, if we have the view that either God made us or mummy and daddy made us, in each case, I began in my mother's womb. So my history goes as far back as the first second of conception, doesn't it? Depends. So then that's as much as I goes. Before that, I wasn't I. But the label I for the Buddha goes back since beginningless time. The label I was on this mind stream before it came to my mother's womb, because it was in a previous body. So the label I referred to that one. It was particularly my particular I, but it was another I. Maybe it was called Fred or dog. But the component, what went on in that mind, sowed seeds in the mind that then produced this next person. We are the creators of this person. It is the virtuous karmic seed at the time of our past death, not more than a few weeks before our consciousness found its way to our mummy's fallopian tube, where it joined our daddy's sperm. It's a virtuous action of our own, of intense, as a result of intense living in vows of morality, of goodness, of non-killing. That is the cause. One of those karmic seeds was triggered at the time of our past death that caused our mind to go to our present mummy's womb, and then all the experiences in this life, all the marvelous good ones, having a reasonable body, having reasonable life, having enough money in the bank, having some people who help us. Not to mention the bad things too. These are the fruit of our past actions. We are the gardener. We are the sower of the seeds in our mind that produce the present fruits. We are the boss. But this is hard to believe, because the feeling we have is it all comes from out there. The feeling we have is I'm this innocent victim set here in stone to whom bad and good things happen without any logic. Then no wonder we're always in this constant state of panic, because we never know what's going to happen. And then we assume nobody knows. We say, oh, well, nobody knows, we say, like it's as if it's a scientific fact. Well, Buddha's got his own take on it. It's been around for several thousand years. It's worth looking at. We're the boss. That's why I love it so much. I love being the boss. But you can't just say it once a day and, oh, yeah, I'm the boss, and then go back to the default mode of victim. You've got to practice it every single second, every time something happens. Every time something good happens, you know, you wake up and you get out of bed and you feel there's no pain in your knees. You go, wow, this is the fruit of my past virtue. How incredible. Then you get your cup of tea and the tea's really tasty. Wow, this is incredible. The fruit of my past virtue. And then the sun is shining through that little peak of the window. Wow, this is amazing. The weather's warm and pleasing to my body. The result of my past virtue. Someone rings you up and says, hello, Robina, fruit of my past virtue. Every minute of the day, there must be thousands of moments in the day when good things happen. But we take them for granted and then have a panic attack when the bad things happen. This is how we all are. Join the universe. So we've got to change the script in our head. We've got to reinterpret our lives. This is being a Buddhist. If you want to, don't have to. Okay, come on, I'll blah, blah for 20 minutes. Now you can talk to me. Come on. Ask me some questions if you'd like to. Any old topic, I'm happy. If you want to.
Yes, Barbara?
Venerable Robina, thank you.
That's weird.
It's Barbara. I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm not sure my understanding is correct, but
Good.
for some reason, I think that, we plant positive seeds and they're there. And then when we do a negative action, that negates the positive seeds, or it impacts
I don't think it's in general, the principle is pretty clear. Yeah. I mean, but in general, it's not as simple as that. But I mean, every time if you're learning to play the piano, right? And you're playing the right notes, and then suddenly you play the wrong note. Well, so that's like showing the negatives. It's a simple example. It does negate every time you play the wrong note, you're canceling out the right note, aren't you? So but yes, but it doesn't stop it. Still there's the effect of the good playing is still there. That one bit of bad playing doesn't cancel out the last 10 minutes of playing good. It just counteracts it, but then you have to change it, and you just simply argue with it, you change it. So of course they are opposite to each other. And this is why the purification practice, for example, Lama Yeshe said, we create negativity with our mind, so we transform it by creating positivity with our mind. So of course there is that effect. Of course there is. Every time you allow a weed to grow in your garden, it doesn't deny all the other flowers, but if the weeds keep growing, they'll suffocate the flowers. And some actions, yes, a very strong negative action can counteract a lot of the good work you've done. You know that, you understand? So yeah, there is that relationship, but it's not as simple as that. Do you understand, Barbara?
I do. Thank you. Thank you, Venerable.
Okay. Anybody else? And the thing is that keep remembering, this is not punishment and reward. It's a natural process. No one runs this law of karma. This is the thing that's shocking to us, because we're always convinced there's someone out there judging us. And that's even if we're, like I said, not religious. We still think mummy's out there, mummy, daddy, God, mummy, daddy, the police, some kind of they. We're always looking over our shoulder of a they who's going to judge us. This is very deep in the bones of ego, very instinctive, which is why we always try to be seen to be a good girl, because we want to be rewarded, not punished. But this constant concept of punishment and reward does not exist in Buddhism. We've made it up, it's very powerful. Karma, my mother used to say, Catholic mummy, virtue has its own rewards. Well, that's actually what karma means. It brings its own result. You don't need to be. That's where you see we're so deeply instinctively believing that if check this, if we do something naughty and no one sees us, then we think, oh, I got away with it. Think about this. Think about that. Because we don't want to. We think if no one saw us do it, if no one knows we took that money, then we think, oh, I got away with it. That proves that we believe in punishment and reward, even if we're not religious. It's very instinctive. Buddha says it's a function of ego, and it's a complete mistake. It's very fascinating. We need to be seen to be a good girl. That's why we like to hide all our naughty things. Sometimes we spend our lives making sure no one ever sees anything naughty about us. We keep it all secret. It's very schizophrenic. Think about it. It's very fascinating. For the Buddha, it's got nothing to do with whoever sees you do something. The doing of a good action is itself what brings the results. The doing of a negative action is itself what brings its results. It doesn't need a person to see it. It doesn't need a person to judge you. It doesn't need a person to reward or punish. We've made up that philosophical concept. This is a pretty powerful concept. It's very fascinating. Anyway, please, more questions. Anything at all, if you'd like. So what's hard about karma, of course, is that who's got clairvoyance? None of us. We can't see the past. We can't see that our mind came from someone else. But this is what's fascinating. We don't. We can see, if we have the materialist view, that we can see for sure. We can prove that this body came from mummy and daddy, and their bodies came from their mummies and daddies, and so on and so forth. So that all the science of genes and all this business, this is quite powerful. We can see it. We can prove that, But the part that's hard, which is why we have to take it at least initially as our working hypothesis, this is the part we've got to kind of squeeze our brains a bit. Especially if we're educated seriously in, say, neuroscience. It's shocking to hear that Buddha's saying, sorry, guys, consciousness is not a function of the brain, it's not a function of the DNA, it's not a function of the genes, but it doesn't contradict. This is the thing. It doesn't say that genes and DNA and brain don't play a role, but it's a bit shocking initially to hear this, which is why all these marvelous conversations between all the best brains in the modern world and the Dalai Lama and his mob, you know, these last 20, 30, 40 years actually, and much of it's been published, which is why it's very encouraging in the modern world to, you know, the business of neuroplasticity, for example. I remember one Canadian scientist back in the 1990s or something saying this is the greatest finding of the 20th century, that you're not stuck with the brain you're born with. Well, I'm thinking this is wonderful. Finally, we're starting to prove what Buddha's been telling us very quietly for 2,500 years, but you're not stuck with the mind you're born with. You can change it, baby. It's been quite a revolutionary finding for us. So this is where, so I would say, without trying to insult neuroscientists, is that what the physical, our physicality, our brain, etc., they are indicators of what is happening in the mind, because you can't see the mind. If it's not physical, you can't see it. But what's going on in the physical is an indicator of what's going on in the mind. That's a really not an insulting way to put it. It's exactly what the Buddhists would say. But of course, the other point is in Buddhism, the radical difference is too that, you know, Buddha, and this is coming from the Indians before the Buddha, as Dalai Lama says, it was these amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago who were the ones who began the investigation into the nature of self, this system into which the Buddha was educated. Then he diverged in his own direction. They're the ones who created this amazing technique that the world still uses, that's still fully alive and extant, called what the world knows as mindfulness meditation, but what the Buddhists refer to technically as, you know, it's a technique for developing concentration, samadhi. And that these Indians have found, they're the geniuses who created this technique that enables you to completely subdue the grosser levels of your consciousness, which includes the activity in the brain. And if you'd fully accomplished this samadhi, this subtle state of concentration, you've gone beyond the grosser level. You've gone beyond, you know, the brain, the sensory, the level, the usual level of conceptuality that we live in. And you've accessed this subtler level of your own consciousness that doesn't exist in dependence upon a brain. This is the radical difference. And these you just have to think about and analyze and look into the literature and start to take it on as your hypothesis, you know. Because as we know, we just deal with the fairly, if this is the case in the modern world, we just deal with the grosser level of mind, the level that we experience day to day at a level of conceptuality, you know. So yeah, the experiential implications and the daily application of the view of karma, such that everything I think and do and say in the past is the producer of me now, and everything I think and do and say is producing the person I become. This is the concept. Now, if you analyze it, this is nothing surprising to us. We get this when it comes to being a musician. Think about this. When it comes to being an artist, a scientist, a botanist, analyze this. Think about this point. We understand perfectly that if I see you playing the piano, I know perfectly well why you are good at piano, because you've programmed your mind 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and then programmed your hands to do what your mind wants. It's called learning to be a musician. So that, and we know, listen to this point. The Buddha would say everything we think and do and say, nothing goes astray. Every millisecond of what we think and do and say is the process that gradually produces the person we become. Well, isn't that not exactly what you're doing as a musician? You sit there programming your mind to an incredible degree of subtlety and precision. Every tiny thought about music, you know, every tiny thought about music ends up producing the musician you become. You just can't say, oh, I can think anything I like. That's an absolute load of nihilistic nonsense. You'll just make chaos on the piano. So we know that every thought counts when it comes to producing a musician, every thought about music. Look at the precision of becoming a mathematician, or a physicist. or a tech, you know, whatever you call, you know, when people learn about computers and that, the precision, the absolute tiniest detail, every tiny thought you have, all together produces the musician you become, the scientist you become. We're not surprised by that, but we don't have that view when it comes to emotions. We have a completely different set of rules that are completely bizarre. You've got to think this way. It's very fascinating. We take incredible responsibility for the thoughts we have when it comes to learning to be a musician. We study so hard, all the views, Bach's thoughts about music, all the theories. It's thought, isn't it? Theories are conceptual. We learn so much about that. We learn it exactly, and then we play and play and play until we've perfected it on the piano. We get that, but this is exactly what you're doing here from the Buddhist view. You're learning to know your mind in terms of the emotions and the delusions and the virtues, and you're programming your mind and turning yourself into this marvelous person. That's what you're producing. You're producing a person who's got less delusions and more virtues. You're producing a marvelous, happy, wise, compassionate person. Who doesn't want to be that? That's nothing surprising. Hello, Linda. Happy to see you, Linda.
Thank you. So when you say about the musician learning,
Yes.
oh, so I'll say it. I'm a registered nurse, so I'll
Okay.
say for 44 years, I learned how to do that.
That's exactly right.
Now, I started meditating, I'll say 20 years ago.
Okay.
But now I've been introduced to you by my therapist. And I have expanded myself because of things that you've introduced me to, you know, like attachment and anger.
Okay.
And, you know, the how Buddha looks at death and that process, because I lost my son. So
Oh my
I'm
God,
very
yes.
interested in
Absolutely.
making this shift,
Yes, Linda.
you know, and when we see someone, as you had pointed out in things that I follow with you, that when we don't like someone, when we see someone that we are faced with that behaves a certain way, and you say, we look at them and we say, well, thank you for showing me this person, and I don't want to be like them.
Yes. That's
Okay.
interesting. It works.
Well, sometimes it does.
Yeah, there you go.
But then I'll be introduced to a sibling that I may not get along with, and then I fall back up, you know,
No, the habits die hard, Linda, don't they? These habits are very deep.
they sure do.
That's
You
true,
know,
isn't it?
and
I know.
you know, so now I'm trying to make this shift after 69 years of being this
honey.
same person,
I understand, Linda. Well done, girl. Amazing.
you know, and you want to make these changes, and
Yes.
they don't come easy.
They don't come easy, but we've got to persevere, because we know that change doesn't happen overnight, don't we? We've got to really have humility and patience with ourselves, Linda, but confidence in the process, confidence. If we have that, we'll persevere. You understand?
Thank you. And I love everything that I watch, that you
Good.
say and do, being
Good.
your own therapist, everything,
Linda.
you know.
Good,
The hardest thing is when you're in Australia or you're in New Mexico, and I'm like, the time change, the
I know,
brain.
I know. Where are you, Linda? What part of the world are you in?
I'm in the United States. I live in Hampton Bays, Long Island.
Oh,
And
okay, on the East Coast. Okay.
on the East Coast, and I have
Okay.
to put it on my phone.
That's right.
The time change, because my
I know.
brain does not want to function
I
in
know.
any other capacity. So
I know,
thank
it's very
you.
funny. It's a pleasure, Linda. Thank you so much for talking, darling. Thank you. I'm happy to hear, and I'm so glad it's useful. Keep going, girl, and don't give up, okay? Good, darling. Thank you, Linda. Thank you. Anyway, I'll be in New York next year. No, I'm going to be in New York next year at some point. Maybe I'll see you then, Linda. I'll be in the New York Center. I forget where. Anyway, at some point. Yes, Alona, talk to me, sweetheart.
Hi, Venerable.
Hello,
Thank you
darling.
for your teaching.
Yes.
I have a question. I was wondering if I purified my karma with my stepfather. I wrote him a letter, like you suggested, in one of our
Good.
talks,
Yes.
but
And
he didn't get it.
Oh!
Waited for almost 2 months,
that's very funny.
but I called him
Yeah.
and I told him that I'm grateful for what he've done for me in my
Yes.
life.
Uh,
And then he got so choked up and cried and he couldn't really talk, and him and my mom, they
Amazing.
were shocked.
Amazing.
Yeah. So
Amazing.
I was after our conversation, I felt so free.
I bet.
You
Yeah.
know, I love the concept of karma. So like you said, I'm the boss. I
Yes.
can take charge, so I don't have to be
That's-
victim.
That's it.
I
darling.
just feel complete freedom. And I
That's
wonder,
amazing,
is it
darling.
over between me and
Well, I
him?
mean, you put a few atomic bombs under it, I would say. I mean, good Lord. Yes, of course. I mean, look at his response. He took it. Was so moved by it. He couldn't believe it. Your mum couldn't believe it. This is the one, honey. Well done, girl. That's amazing, Alona. Keep moving, keep moving, keep moving. Just keep putting atomic bombs on it all the time. And it's something as simple as just making that shift. One small thing can bring so much change, can't it? It's amazing. Well done, Alona. Amazing. Good on you, girl.
Thanks
Thank you,
for your
darling.
teaching.
Thank you,
Because of
sweetheart.
you, I did this.
Good. Thank you.
I'm
Well
changing
done.
my view. I love
There
it.
you go,
Thank
darling.
you.
That's exactly right. Exactly, darling. So who else? Somebody. Who else is there, Anna? Anybody there, Anna? Anybody in the chat box, for example?
There's nothing in the chat, Venerable.
Okay.
Oh,
Oh, there's
Dylan. Hi,
Hello,
Dylan.
Dylan. Hello, Dylan. Talk to me, darling.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you, Venerable, for taking my
Good.
question.
Good.
What I'm wondering about is if Christianity has a God and a devil, but Buddhism does not, it makes me think about the deities, the good deities and the
Of
bad.
course.
And I'm
In
wondering,
Buddhism. You mean in
Yeah,
Buddhism?
in
Yeah,
Buddhism,
I'll explain.
and I'm just okay. And I'm just wondering if sometimes maybe we can they influence us or.
I understand. No, I understand. It's a good point. Okay, I'll explain. I'll try and explain. Okay. So there's what's very fascinating about the concept in, say, Christianity and Islam and others religions where they talk about a creator. And when you look at I always quote this. I don't know if you've heard me say this, Dylan, but I'll say it again here. I always joke about this. It's not a joke, but it's interesting. I was brought up a Catholic, okay? And I really was in love with my Catholic upbringing. I mean, I was a naughty girl, but I always wanted to be a nun. I was in love with Our Lady, the saints. I was really serious about it, you know? And I remember, but what was fascinating, I never much thought of God as my creator. I think I must have been a Buddhist from the very beginning because it was more like the feeling of Buddha. So the point is this. One time, at a Catholic university in Melbourne, where I'm from, in Australia, I had to give a talk at this conference at the Catholic University. And I remember up until the morning I had to give my talk, I didn't know what to talk about. I just had 20 minutes. So I looked up the Merriam-Webster dictionary for the definition of God. And it said 3 essential qualities: infinite wisdom, infinite power, and infinite compassion. And I thought, well, isn't that interesting? Because they're the same 3 qualities that in the Buddhist philosophical teachings describe what a Buddha is. A Buddha, for the Buddha, the Mahayana view, every being, the difference is this, the radical difference is this. Buddha would assert this energy that's all-knowing, all-seeing, all-compassionate, all-wise. But the difference is the Christians and Muslims would say there's only one of those and he's the boss and he creates everything else. But the Buddhist view is everybody can become that one. That's the potential of every mind. So when you've accomplished that and I've accomplished that and Anna's accomplished that, you could argue we're just one big cosmic, all-knowing, all-seeing, all-compassionate consciousness. So in many ways, there's a similarity. It seems to me humans over the centuries have seen similar things, but also come to different philosophical conclusions about them. That's the first point. So the word Buddha refers to all-knowing, all-compassionate mind, and that's your potential. So when Dylan is fully developed, that'll be the nature of his mind. Okay, now, but when Dylan is fully developed as a Buddha, the reason he became a Buddha, what propelled him life after life to become a Buddha, is his compassion, his wish to help others. So then Buddha's not going to sit in the sky being all subtle, he's going to, she, it, whatever, will manifest in different bodies to benefit sentient beings. So the one behind me, Shakyamuni Buddha, this statue, that's the classic image we have of Mr. Buddha, who lived in India 2,500 years ago. But when you've achieved Buddhahood, you can manifest in hundreds of bodies, thousands of bodies. This, of course, sounds like science fiction. So this is where it's depicted in the tantric teachings and the more advanced philosophical teachings of Buddhism, which are mainly only existing in Tibet. You see all the so-called deities, quote unquote. Well, the term deity there is just used as the equivalent for the word Buddha. There's no concept of a creator. There's no concept of anything else. They're different. All they are different manifestations of different psychological qualities that by practicing those, that helps us cultivate. So there's the Buddha of compassion. There's one Buddha called Tara, who is the Buddha of action. So by practice, each of those are just visual images of qualities such that by practicing those practices, by saying those mantras, we develop those qualities. But they're just different manifestations of Buddha mind. They're not a creator. They're not, in a sense, deity. And of course, by having a relationship, I mean, it's a bit similar. If you want to learn tennis, you can't just read a book. You got to go find your own Roger Federer, and you have that person who shows you how to play tennis. Well, that's the function of these practices. By practicing Chenrezig, the Buddha of compassion, it helps you become like that. So they're methods of practicing to help you develop those qualities. Do you understand, Dylan? That's the purpose.
I think so. Sometimes I feel like because I've created some bad karma that Kali or somebody's going to come and mess my life up, but that's not how it works.
Sure. No, I mean, we all have that view. That's the kind of paranoia of this dualistic view of naughty and good and blame and punishment and reward. We have it very deep, you know.
Perfect. Thank you.
There you go, Dylan.
Thank you.
Anybody else have something to ask or say, please? It's very helpful. Yes. Hello,
Kim.
Kim. Hello, sweetheart. Talk to me. Unmute, darling. Yeah. No, still not unmuted. There you go. Now I can see and hear you, darling. Good. Well done.
Thank you. I find it curious, you frequently reference the amazing Indians from
Yes.
3,000 years ago.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on perhaps why Buddha diverged?
Yeah, exactly. A good point. Exactly. Very precise point. A very precise point. I mean, many points, but one really key point, Kim, is in his own observation of the final or ultimate nature of how things exist. So, you know, the different in Buddhism and the Hindus as well, there's different levels of suffering. So they found methods through working on the mind to get rid of the gross level of suffering. They found methods to work on the mind by working on the mind to get rid of attachment and the subtler levels of suffering. But the Buddha have found, this is Buddha's view, that when he went as far as he could go in these amazing Indians' views, there still was something that they posited as being an intrinsic self. He felt that they hadn't gone far enough. So it's all related to the ultimate teachings about emptiness. That's the difference. That's where he diverged.
Perfect. That makes perfect sense.
All right.
Thank
Good.
you very much.
All right, Kim. Good, darling. Thanks. I mean, other points as well, but that's the key point.
Okay.
He felt that they still, even though the subtlest level, the grosser levels of suffering had been ceased, but there's still the subtlest level that they felt was liberation. He said, no, not liberation yet. There was further to go. So that's mainly all his teachings about selflessness and emptiness. That's the difference. Yeah.
Okay.
Good, Kim.
Makes
Thank
sense.
you.
Thank you.
Yes, Tim. Tim O'Connor, hello.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. You've got to unmute, I think.
There
There
we
you go. That's it.
Thank you for the talk.
Yes, good.
Thinking about karma and
Yes.
karma ripening and
Yes.
the experience of people around me.
Yes.
I have a lot of experience of, there's a lot of people around me with very, very heavy mental illness.
I hear you. I hear you, Tim. I hear you.
Lots of PTSD, bipolar,
Yes.
just very, very heavy.
Yes.
And sometimes, you know, I try to practice patience and working with, and sometimes, you know, getting angry about it and
Sure.
working through it.
Yeah.
Now, would the best practice be to, would that be a Chenrezig practice?
I understand, Tim. It's a very good point. Well, first of all, one point I want to say, I don't know if you agree with this, but I think these days, more and more, we're labeling people more and more with these kinds of things. I'm sure 50, 60 years ago, we all had the same problems. I mean, from the Buddhist point of view, we've all got the same problems. It's just that we didn't call them PTSD and all those business, but everybody now's got a label. So I think but I mean, I think maybe also, first point, Tim, I got a feeling because you're practicing, you're noticing more and more that everyone's crazy, everyone's suffering, everyone's deluded. It's just a question of degree, whereas once we would have taken it for granted. I've got a feeling it's because your awareness is growing, you're noticing it more and more. But may I ask you one question? Is it in your family, in your work, or, I mean, is it people you have to work with and deal with every day, or is it just in passing?
I grew up in a household. One of my sisters was diagnosed with bipolar disorder when I was very young, and I grew up in a household where that was very prominent and very intense.
I understand.
And there's more kind of a coming out from different family.
Okay, I understand. Well, the thing is, first of all, Tim, something to say, there's different things to answer. Yes, of course, to answer your question, Chenrezig, perfect. But there's other things as well we should think about. It's sort of like if you, let's say you're an alcoholic and you're telling me, or you've got some tendency to be an alcoholic, and you're telling me that you're surrounded by alcoholics. Well, I would say your practice is to get the hell out of the way. You have to know what your capability is, Tim. If you're, let's say, fragile and join the universe, and other people's craziness really drags you down, without blaming them, you realize you've got to change your conditions. You've got to get out. You've got to get the hell away. We've got to really understand that if we can have enough self-respect in our own relationships. I mean, look at the number of people who get murdered in relationships, who go crazy in relationships. Yes, the husband is a maniac, but if the partner is so fragile that she ends up killing the husband because she can't handle it. But how come we don't have enough self-respect to realize, God Almighty, let me get the hell out of here, because we don't realize we are affected by the outside world. So that's my first point for any of us. We have to know if we can handle, if we are capable. Now, if you're a bodhisattva, honey child, the more suffering, the better. It's grist for their mill. They're so powerful. They're so practiced. They can deal with people's suffering and they know how to help. So first question is, for every one of us, we've got to look at our conditions. Is this an ideal condition? Should I change it? Then, if you can, great. If not, do every bit of practice you possibly can. Are we communicating? So yeah, Chenrezig, of course. Because you see, the other one is, yeah. So no, okay, that's good. No, I think that's what I wanted to say. Does that make sense, Tim?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, good. But Chenrezig, very powerful. Absolutely. Because the thing is, the more you see your mind and see your delusions, the more it's evident in everybody else, you know. Everybody's got, I mean, this is where in our culture, you know, we have all these different labels for these mental illnesses. Well, Buddha's got his labels and he hasn't changed in 2,500 years. They're called attachment, anger, you know, past karma, ripening. It's a combination of all of these, and they all can be, PTSD and all those can all be explained in Buddhist terms very clearly. So it's just the way the world is. I mean, you know, in our culture, often it's the people down over there, they're the mentally ill ones and the rest of us are normal. Well, Buddha says, no, honey, as long as you got any attachment, any anger, any irritation, any upset, you're mentally ill. It's a question of degree. It's a shocking way to put it, but his view of suffering is much more subtle than ours, you know. So the more you see your own mind, honey, the more you're going to see other people. But the more you develop your own mind, the more compassion it'll give you, because you realize everybody's in the same boat. But if it overwhelms you, change your friends, change your relationships. There's no question. We have to be intelligent. Do you understand, Tim? Thank you so much. Hello, Shrey. Talk to me.
Hi, Venerable Robina. It's nice to see you again.
Yes, absolutely.
My question was on the Mahamudra book that you edited.
Yes.
I was wondering when trying to practice that, if you had any practical tips for how to connect with the object of concentration that is the clarity of mind, and how to focus on that.
Yeah, the thing is, the clarity of the mind is the label given to what they call the conventional nature of our mind. And then the emptiness of the mind is the ultimate nature of the mind. But the thing is that even the clarity itself, and it sounds quite abstract, it's something already quite subtle. So you just got to go towards it. You got to, and that's why you've got to start somewhere when you start to concentrate, and you simply take whatever pops up in your mind. And as the mind begins to settle, you will start to taste this clarity of your mind. Because clarity of the mind means doesn't just mean you thinking clearly. It means the actual non-physicality of your mind, which is quite a subtle point. So you start with where you are. You start with concentrating on whatever thoughts pop up in your mind, and you train the concentration. You train your attention simply to stay on that. And that process is what, if you start to be successful, that process of focusing on whatever thought settles the mind. And then slowly you'll start to have access to the clarity of the mind.
Thank you.
Okay, darling. Good. Thank you. 10 minutes to go, folks. Hello, Christine. Happy to see you again, sweetheart.
Thank you, Venerable. Good to
Good.
see you this morning too.
Yes, yes.
So for a very, very long time, several years, I have been doing the best I can to follow
Yes,
the precepts.
yes.
And I noticed there a couple years ago for about a minute, I was following them to my benefit, not how they were intended. And then, of course, reined myself back in, did a lot of reading, a lot of understanding, and went back to following the precepts again as they're written, and being more proactive within the Sangha and community.
Are you talking about the 5 laypersons' vows, Christine? Not killing,
Correct.
not stealing, not lying, no sexual misconduct, and the 5th one, if you've got it, no intoxicants. You're talking about those 5, yes?
Correct, yes.
Okay, good. Go on then. So what's the point about them? Because the crucial thing about these vows, Christine, that sometimes is not evident to us in our culture. The main reason we try to live according to these precepts is for our own benefit. We're trying to harness our body and speech. We're trying to harness our behavior, and we are the direct beneficiaries of that. That's important.
And I keep trying to keep that mindful presence of right thought, right deed, right word, right action.
That's right.
And every time I open my mouth, I'm always going, does this fit that criteria first?
I understand. Well, I think
It's
but I want to say something else, Christine. I think you're leaping ahead a bit. There's very specific actions. The first thing is the precepts are not, they're not about right speech. They're about refraining from wrong speech. So the very first level of practice, Christine, and really please hear the difference, is to not say negative words, not do negative actions. That's a very powerful level. Then next is to do right actions, to say right words. That's another level of practice, darling. They're separate and different. And the first one has to be one, refraining from the negative. It's a very specific level of practice. Can you hear the difference?
I can hear the difference. And
It's
maybe
important to hear that. And that's the first level, darling. It's too much to ask yourself to do the right thing and say the right word. That's more advanced. We've got to refrain from saying the lies, refrain from abusing, refrain from killing. That's a very specific level of practice first. And that demands great attention. And that disciplines us beautifully. Then it's easy to say the right thing and do the right thing.
So I think you just answered my question. That's
Good.
why I'm so exhausted.
Yes, exactly. You are. I can imagine you're exhausted. So, darling girl,
So
give
thank
yourself a
you.
break. Just practice not lying. And say not, you see, not lying doesn't mean, oh, I've got to say everything that's true and you tell everybody about your constipation and everything that goes on for you. No, not lying means being skillful that the words you say to another person are not untruthful. So that's a big fat practice. And refraining when you see the ant to try not to harm it. Refraining when you see another person to not steal something that does not given to you. It's very specific. And once you've done this, you've harnessed your energy a lot. Now you can go to the next level, darling. So relax.
Thank you so much. Thank you so very much for that. Thank you.
Good, Christine. That's a good point. Thank you. Announcements. What's the announcements? What's that? What's announcements, Mary?
I posted the compassion meditation to answer Tim's question, or just to complement his inquiry.
Which compassion meditation is it?
It's the Chenrezig tonight.
I know, but which version? Which one is it?
I have to look on the website. It's with, I have to look on the website to get the details. So that's happening.
Where did you get the practice from though, Mary?
Pardon me?
Where did you get the practice from?
It's posted on the website. Mary Mogenberg is facilitating it.
Oh, okay, good. So it's on our website. That's great. Very good. Well done. Thank you, darling. So, darling people, it's time to go practically. But I think we've had a good hour, lots of food for thought. Christine's point was great. The very first level of practice, people, entry level junior school grade 1. Don't even try, don't try to be a good girl or a bad girl. Don't try to be a good girl. Stop being a bad girl. So control the body, control the speech. They're the servants of the mind, at least that first level, and you are the beneficiary. But of course, as Lama Zopa says, when you refrain from killing the rat, you just created the virtuous karma of not killing, which is amazing. But the rat will still be happy. The rats and roaches will be, they'll have a party because you leave them in peace. So they're the beneficiaries as well. But this first level of practice, we are the beneficiary. Yes, Christine's got a hand. Yes, Christine, darling.
And I just wanted to ask you, so
Yeah.
hypothetically speaking,
Yeah.
if you had 3 to 6 months left in your lifetime,
Yes.
what do you think, what do you believe, or what is said is the most
Do.
important thing
Yes, darling, I agree.
to
Absolutely.
emphasize?
The thing would be just to galvanize yourself into action of living in the vows, doing some practice every day, connecting with the Buddha, saying mantras, and trying to be useful to other sentient beings. That's the bottom line. That's the essence of all the practice, the wisdom wing and the compassion wing. You'd focus on that. But the essence, the real powerful one, is the vows, Christine. The really powerful one for the Buddha is the vows. Vows for the Buddha are psychologically so incredibly potent because you see, what we have to do, this is why it's so important, the point you brought up. We need to really realize this level of practice of merely not killing, not stealing, not lying. It sounds very abstract and rather negative, in fact, but actually it's profound because the Buddha's got these 3 levels of vows, you see, the Bodhisattva vows and the Tantric vows on top of these first ones. And the fact of the matter is, we need, when we die, Christine, we need in our little bank vault of karmic seeds, remembering everything you think and do and say drops karmic seeds into your bank vault. We need bucket loads of really delicious, powerful, intentional, non-killing, non-harming, non-lying, non-stealing karmic seeds, especially non-killing, because that's the cause, honey child, of when you die, the karmic seed that you want to be triggered is non-killing. And the best way to practice the practice of non-killing is within the vows of non-killing, because Lama Zopa says, and this is Buddha's teaching, 24 hours a day that you're keeping your vows of non-killing, even without intention, even when you're asleep, even when you're walking down the street. Vows are so potent, they're said to be some subtle physical energy that even is visible to clairvoyance, because it's a powerful thing psychologically that every second of the day you're ticking over and you're dropping into your karmic bank vault lots of delicious non-killing karmic seeds, and they are the cause of getting a human body. They're the cause of having a decent human life, so you can get another rebirth and keep on moving on your spiritual path. Okay.
Thank you very
Darling,
much.
it's also, if you're interested in the whole thing, there's a really excellent book of Lama Zopa's, and we're going to be doing a course on it. We do at least 2 or 3 a year at the center, and the book is by Lama Zopa, and it's a handbook. It's absolutely brilliant. It's called How to Face Death Without Fear. It's published by Wisdom, and it's like a handbook of all the so many, what to do the weeks and months and the days and the hours before death. But the essence of it, darling, your question is, you practice living in vows, do practice every day, connect to the Buddha, do mantras, and be of benefit to others. That's it, honey child. That's the practice. That's the essence of all of it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Venerable.
Thank you, sweetheart. Okay, Mary, time to go, babe.
My other announcement, Venerable Robina and class, I posted in the chat the dates of Venerable's workshop retreat, How to Get Ready for Death, which is coming up November 19th, 20th.
Oh, I forgot. Oh, there you go, Christine. There it is. We're doing one. I forgot. Good. Okay, that's perfect. We're doing a weekend, aren't we? Yes? Okay, good. Good, darlings. We'll go through Lama Zopa.
Oh, that's so great.
Yes.
That's
yes.
fantastic. Thank you.
Good. No, it's
Thank you
packed
so
full of-
much.
and yeah, it's packed full of lots of good information. We'll go through that. Okay, darling girls and boys, thank you so much. I'm happy to see you all.
Venerable.
Thank you. Happy to see you, Aline. How are you, darling? You've been watching she's been watching my, what is it? What have I been doing lately? TikTok progress.
TikTok. I got you on TikTok, Robina. And
She kept saying I should do TikTok. So kind Jamie does all my social media.